All right, Rose, take it away.
Okay, thanks, Len. So good morning, afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us for this month's Harvest Community WebEx. This month we are featuring the topic on command line utilities. We have a guest speaker. Warren McCall will be our presenter for today. Warren is the product manager for our Application Lifecycle Conductor product, CA Application Lifecycle Conductor, and a resident Harvest expert. So we appreciate Warren taking the time to share all of this with all of you today. Before I hand it over to Warren, though, I just want to go through just a general logistical point here that we do not have the capability to accept audio questions. What we're going to do is, upon conclusion of the WebEx, we'll take a look at the Q&A through the WebEx. So if you have a question, feel free to go ahead and type it in the Q&A area within the WebEx, and or use the chat capability within WebEx, and either Len or myself will address those questions, and we'll share them with Warren at the end of the WebEx. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Warren, and we'll talk about command line utilities. Take it away, Warren.
Thank you very much, Rose. Can you hear me, Rose?
I can.
Excellent. Okay, I was having some audio problems earlier. Okay, so let me, now I guess I just want to make sure everybody else can hear and see as well. Can somebody throw up in a chat window whether they can see this presentation, or Rose, can you see the presentation fine?
Yes, I can.
Excellent. Okay, so I'll be in full screen mode with this presentation, so I won't see any questions that pop up. So if questions do pop up, please let me know if you see them pop up in WebEx, and I'll take questions. And so again, if you have any questions at any point in time during this presentation, you don't need to wait to the end. Please go ahead and jump in. I think these sessions, if they're interactive, can be much more valuable than necessarily waiting to the end for this. So as Rose said, we're going to be doing a presentation on command line utilities. My name is Warren McCall. I've been I hate to say it, a very long time Harvest user, well before CA acquired Harvest from another company, and so I've been working with the product for at least 15 years, and have seen it go through its different incarnations from a very Unix-based system all the way through to a very, very powerful enterprise source code management system and change management system. And during that time, one of the things that's stayed pretty steady throughout is the capabilities and the functionality of the command line utilities. And I'm finding that in the last number of years, they're often overlooked. So we thought it was valuable to have an overview of the command line utilities. Now, if you're looking for a very technical discussion and demonstration, the time period allowed in this presentation won't cover that. But certainly, don't hesitate to ask us some technical questions. I can go as technically deep as we need to go, but there are time limitations, and we can certainly have follow-ups and go into more detail as well. So I'm going to cover, what are command line utilities. Why should anyone be interested in command line utilities? Who uses them? And then we're going to look at, some scripting capabilities and get into more detail through the Q&A as well. So what are command line utilities? So if anyone out there and probably in your organization you have them, lots of people who are using tools such as Subversion and Git, those tools are command line driven. And most of the functionality that you see users using, probably 70 to 80% is what I've seen, is being done through the command line utilities with those tools. There are interfaces, GUI interfaces for those tools. For Subversion, for example, there's numerous SVN type interfaces. But again, most of the work for those tools is being done through the command line utilities so that they can do checkouts and check-ins and creating labels and doing the work that they need to do. Harvest allows you to perform almost any function with command line utilities. And there's actually some functions that you can perform with command line utilities that there is no way to do them in the actual Harvest user or administration interface. They're very, very flexible because they're parameter driven. You can drive these command line utilities from scripts. You can drive them from Harvest itself. You can drive them from web pages. You can drive them from anything that you can think of. It's a very powerful tool for doing any type of work, and it's very flexible. And it allows you to write any level of integration with Harvest that you might want to. So if you have a third-party or custom-driven or custom-developed tool that you have in-house, and you'd like it to talk to Harvest, whether it's receiving data from Harvest or whether it's actually having Harvest drive functionality, you can do all of that through the command line interface. They're very consistent across the board. So the format and usage of each of the command line utilities is very consistent. So that makes it very easy to use. Once you learn how to use one of the command line utilities, it's very easy to apply that across all of the different command line utilities. It's very well documented, and it is comprehensive. And when I say well documented, one of the things that you'll probably want to look at, I just need to share something else out. I'm going to share out my Firefox for a second here. One of the things to know is that every single command line and all of the usage for that command line is available in the command line reference guide. I'm going to jump back and forth between these a little bit as we go through. But if we look at the list of using the command line utilities, you can see there's a pretty broad list here of command line utilities. On the left, in the left pane here, the menu pane, you can see all of the different command line utilities. And you know, as an example, I'm going to show this later, but you know, the policy HB set, which allows you to set all your password policies in Harvest, which is something that you do through the command line. It's not actually done through the administration interface. There's lots of detail about this utility, how it works, you know, how you set it up. Everything that you can need to know about using this command line utility or any command line utility is available in this command line reference guide. So I'll go back to the slide presentation. So command line, so why should you be interested and who's interested? Command lines give you the ability to make things happen outside of Harvest. And that's outside of the workbench interface, the admin interface, the workbench, the plugins for Visual Studio, for Eclipse, any normal method, GUI method that you use to get into Harvest. The command line interface gives you the ability to perform those functions outside of Harvest. So it's useful for automation, integration, communication with external applications, services, machines. A lot of folks use this to ease repetitive tasks. So if there's something that's being performed on a regular basis by, let's say, a build team, they're regularly going into the build state in your Harvest project, and they're doing a checkout of all of the latest versions of the code in the build state to do a build. Well, you can automate that and take that repetitive task and get rid of all your mistakes by using a command line function like hsync, where you can actually do a checkout and have it automated. You could schedule it and have it happen on a regular basis, whether it's every hour, every day, every minute, whatever it might be. The command line interface can make that happen. And that helps you ensure accuracy, because in the interface, as we know, users can have the ability to choose the wrong package. They have the ability to choose the wrong directory on the client side. They have the ability to choose the wrong view path when they're doing checkouts. So there's lots of things that can potentially go wrong when users are selecting items. And if there is that ability to say, well, no, we've got a repetitive task, you can script that and automate it. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be repetitive. You could have different tasks if you have the ability to determine how you would drive that script. So if you can put in a parameter or a variable into a script, you can pass that parameter or that variable to your command line interface to have it perform the function for you. So these functions are useful for a bunch of different personas in the organization, from developers to builders to release managers. Testers use this, even for administrators. A lot of administrators use command line utilities to perform functions such as creating repositories, baselining repositories. All of those types of functions are available through the command line interface. It makes it much easier for check-ins and checkouts if they're working outside of a work area. It allows me to communicate with remote machines, so if I'm actually doing agent communication, I can do checkouts to agents through command line interfaces. It allows you to do incremental builds, perform dependency checking, populate staging servers. The sky's the limit when it comes to what you can do with command line interface tools. They can also be used for internal Harvest user-defined processes. So if you've done any UDPs in Harvest, you've probably used some of the command line utilities because, as an example, one of the things that's popular with a lot of our clients, excuse me, is every time that somebody does a check-in on the branch, if we don't want them to stay on the branch for a long period of time, post check-in, you could have a concurrent merge process run automatically. And so this third bullet down, HCCMRG, is the Harvest concurrent merge. So if somebody's checking in against a package, we now know that package variable is automatically available to Harvest. We could pass that to the concurrent merge command line utility through a UDP and have that package automatically concurrent merged. So all of the versions are now merged to the trunk. I'm not saying that that is what you should do, but that is something that you can do from an automation point of view, and it allows you to start having some more control over what's happening in your development process in your organization. I'll go through some of these examples, but there's some basic things like Harvest check-in, Harvest check-out, Harvest creating packages, promoting packages, demoting packages, concurrent merging. You can do delete versions, remove items. Every single function that you can perform in the tool can be done through a command line interface. So if you can think about doing it, you can perform that with a CLI. And the functions are all very similar. So the command is basically, some of the commands in a bit here, but the command is basically the name of the program, whether it be HCO, which is Harvest Checkout, HCO, and then you have a switch. And you have a switch and a parameter. And every CLI has a common set of switches and parameters, and then there's unique switches and parameters for different CLIs depending on whether they're interacting with packages or if they're interacting with view paths or if they're interacting with versions or if they're interacting with users. They have different types of switches that may be unique to themselves. And all the CLIs are secure. You cannot bypass your Harvest project security using a command line interface tool. So if you're trying to run a Harvest create package through an HCP process, that create package process has to exist in the project, in the state that you're trying to run it in. It needs to be accessible by the user that's running the command line interface, and all of the security needs to be met. So the CLIs do not give anyone a way to bypass the project model that you've built or the security that you've built in your Harvest projects as administrators, which makes sense, but it's very important to understand that. So I'll just go through a couple of the command line interfaces. This one here is the Harvest approve package. So obviously we all know that when you want to approve a package, you can right-click on a package in the Harvest workbench or in the Eclipse interface, and if you have access to a process, the approve process, it becomes available to you to execute that approve package process. So in this case, I'm executing an approve package process through a command line interface. And in the syntax, I'll actually highlight this syntax here. Oh, I can't highlight in this view, but under syntax, in this case, the HAP is the name of the program. In this case, I'm going to approve a package called my package. I'm going to do it against the broker, in this case called broker. And minus B, you'd put in the broker name. Minus EN, we'd put in the project name. Minus ST is the state, you put in the state name. And in this case, I'm putting in the minus user and minus password. You can put this right into the command line utility. And then I'm going to have an output file created as well. So I'm going to have a log file created. Nice thing about all the command line utilities, you can actually have these log files created wherever you want to have them created, whether it be locally, whether it be on remote machines. These log files can be created, and they can be analyzed to determine, the success or failure of the CLI. Every single CLI follows a format for the return codes, and the return codes are documented in the command line interface guide. And you can then have logic that's built upon the output of the CLI to determine success or failure. And on certain ones, you actually have all kinds of different information that you can pull out of the log file, and it's very well formatted, and it's built for automation. In this case, I actually put in a user ID and I put in a password. I don't have to put in a user ID and password. I can actually put in an encrypted file name. So you can actually create encrypted files that include user IDs and passwords for your CLIs. And you can pass them in. There's this -EH file name. So I can actually pass in the encrypted harvest file name, and it gives me user ID and password combinations that are encrypted. And guess what? You create those encrypted user ID and passwords with another command line interface called SVRENC, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. But this becomes very powerful. Obviously, you don't want to be passing these user ID and passwords on the command line, because if you're on Unix, for example, I can see the processes that might be running, and I could actually see those user IDs and passwords by doing a PS-EF, and I can actually see those in the Unix process list. But with encrypted user ID password combinations, I just pass the encrypted password into the command line, and Harvest will decrypt that password to make sure that it's valid before it runs your command line utility. And again, I'm going to note that approval groups and security follow the groups and the security in the project process. So the user that you define here needs to be a user that can not only execute this process, but they also need to be in a group that makes sense in the approval process itself. So again, you're not bypassing any of the security or model configuration that you set up in Harvest itself. If you have multiple approval processes, in this case, the first one in the list is used. So when a command line utility is run, it goes through your list of processes until it finds that first one. So if I'm running an HCO, it'll look at that first checkout process. If you have more than one checkout process in a state and in your project, or more than one approval process, in this case, in a state, in a project, and you want to use something other than the one that's first in the list that you see in the administration or the workbench tool, you can name it with a -p variable. Actually, sorry, it's not -p, it's the -pn variable. I made a mistake here. So it's actually the -pn variable, that's the process name. So if you actually need to name a process, you can, so that you can use the appropriate process when you're running the CLI. HCI is very similar. Some of the differences that I want to point out is, when you're actually running an HCI, you'll notice that there's a switch here called the -VP, which is your view path. You need to specify, well, you don't need to specify your view path name. If you don't, it'll go from the top level. But if you want to search in a particular directory or a particular view path, you would put in the view path that you want to start from. And then the CP is the client path. And you, again, would put the top level client path that you want to check out to. Or actually, sorry, in this case, I'm checking in from. Sorry, I'm actually checking in from my client path. I'm checking into my repository view path. I can also do searches, wildcard searches. So I can specify in this case, I'm going to check in all the .c programs from my dir2 and descending, because I'm actually searching through all of the subfolders as well. And I'm going to check it into the dir2 repository path. And then there's another one here which is called the output path, -OP. And this is very well documented. Again, this is the kind of stuff you're going to want to read the command line user or the command line interface guide. But -OPPC is the preserve and create, just like it is in the actual check-in process that you have in the workbench tool. But in this case, what it's going to do is it's going to preserve directories that already exist, and it's going to create those directories that don't exist in the repository, and it's going to check those .c files into the appropriate folders in my repository. If I just wanted all the files underneath my client path dir2, I would just use the asterisk, the star. I wouldn't go star.c. I'd say HCI star, and it would then check in everything underneath dir2. Again, security process is enforced, and if you have multiple check-in processes, you can use the first in the list or use the -pn variable. Copy and paste failed me. HSync Again, this is a powerful tool, and together with hrefresh. If you're not using hsync and hrefresh, I recommend that you read about their capabilities. They're both very, very powerful tools, especially hrefresh. Hrefresh is used, pretty globally in the Harvest community to along with hsync to build staging folders, populate build servers, basically communicating with Harvest to actually get the right files out of Harvest at the right stage of the life cycle so that it's available for building, for testing, for deploying. Harvest can get that code out, and it knows exactly what needs to be available to your hsync or hrefresh processes based upon all the packages that are in a state and the working view that we're currently working with. So it's a very powerful set of utilities. And again, if you have any questions on, I could actually do an hour-long presentation just on hrefresh itself because it is such a flexible, powerful tool. And I do find that it is underused. So if you're taking notes and you're not using it, read about hrefresh and don't hesitate to follow up on the community, and we can actually talk about hrefresh itself because that's a command line utility that is an application unto itself. So hsync is basically a synchronized checkout process, but you get a lot of capability with the hsync process. It allows you to synchronize your client folders with your repository view paths. And again, I talked about the encrypted password file here. It's important to use your encrypted password files rather than, in this case, and this is my simple example of putting in a user ID and password directly into the command line interface itself. So this is a utility that I'm hoping all administrators know about. But again, it's a command line utility that's HP Pulse Set is setting your password policy for your organization. There's a corollary to this tool called HP Pulse Get, which gets your password policy. So if you are unaware of your password policy in your Harvest installation, you can get that into a text file, and you can see exactly, oh, this is actually what our password file is. And the best thing about that HP Pulse Get is it gets your password file, and then you can edit that password file and reapply it with HP Pulse Set to set your password policy. So I'm just going to go out to the the command line reference guide and show these two utilities. So usage example, sorry, it's right here. So for example, here is an example policy file, and so you can decide how you want to set up your password policies, and so you can have everything, allow username as password, when do I start warning them about an age expiry 30 days before, how many max fail attempts before lockout, maximum password age, how old can my password be. You can define all of this, and you can actually have, those are global overrides. You can also have user level overrides, so you can say that, for example, Paul's password, he has to change it on the next logon. And Maria, for whatever reason, Maria's password never expires. This is set to true. So you can define in detail your password policy with this utility. And again, this is another CLI that you run to set your password policy. HP Pulse Get is the get password policy. It's just the converse of that, and it goes ahead and it grabs all of the policies that you have that are in the Harvest database, and it puts it into that exact file format that you can then use and modify and reset into your password. And I've actually found sites where they did not know about these utilities, and I think it's important that all administrators be aware that those are there. This is actually a great book, this book here, the Command Line Interface Guide. It's a very powerful one to read. So some of the other reasons why you might want to use command line utilities rather than trying to do all of this from the command line. One of them is as I mentioned, there's certain things that you just cannot do in the administration tool or the workbench that you can with CLIs. hrefresh is an example. hrefresh is only available through the command line interface. The policy management is only available through the command line interface. So there's reasons why you're going to need and want to run the command line interface. It definitely helps you make less mistakes. You can design a checkout process once. If you're a developer and every single morning you come in and what you want to do is refresh your work area. Instead of going into Harvest, launching the Harvest Workbench, refreshing your work area, you could have a simple little batch script on your PC or a shell script on your Unix box that you run when you come in. And it goes out and it refreshes your work area. And it's done. It's taken care of. You don't have to worry about it, less mistakes. You just double-click on an icon. It goes ahead and runs, and it does exactly what you need to do. You know that all of your parameters are correct, and if you change your project or your context or what you're working on, you can go ahead and have a parameter-driven one where you can actually define that, and maybe you're actually working on 3 packages today, and you just have a little utility file that says, okay, here's the 3 packages I'm working on. Go run my script and refresh my work areas. And when you're done working at the end of the day, you want to do a synchronize and a commit. Again, you could have a little utility that goes ahead and runs that synchronize and commit for you, so you don't need to do that from the workbench if you don't want to. So certainly there are developers that like running these types of utilities. Another reason you might want to do it is running post and pre-link UDPs from the workbench. So post and pre-link UDPs allow you to set up automation, error checking, validation. I'll go into that a little bit, but UDPs are mainly use command line interface tools. And they be set up in the administration tool, and when you're working in the workbench, or even when you're working through a command line tool, if there's a process that has a pre-link or a post-link UDP, it will automatically be kicked off. And you know, here's an example. I talked about this earlier, but an example would be a post-link concurrent merge to a concurrent development check-in. Whenever a concurrent development check-in runs, it could run an HCC MRG, which would then merge that package onto the trunk. And if there's merge tags, they would then need to be dealt with. You can develop your own custom web-based interface into Harvest to call functions, or your mobile-based interface. You can do whatever you need to do. You could write your own web services API that talks to the command line interfaces, and you could have your mobile application talk to your web services API that talks to the command line tools, that then talks to Harvest and performs a functions and gets the data back to your web services API that pushes it back to your mobile interface. There's all kinds of ways that you can actually use CLIs. And again, CLIs are a great integration engine into Harvest and out of Harvest as well. So, UDP dialogues. Rose, can you just, I'm going to put a question out there, and you can just let me know the answer that might come back. Is everyone here using user-defined processes within your environment? So if you guys can jump in and maybe just pop into the chat window so we can see that, then Rose can collect that, and I'll just keep on talking here. So here's a user-defined process dialog, and in this case I'm actually running the hrefresh process. And as you notice, I'm passing in some parameters into hrefresh. I'm passing in the broker name, because Harvest knows the broker you're working on, so it can pass in that broker name programmatically. I'm passing in the project name. I'm passing in the state name. And that's my program. And so in this case, hrefresh will be defined on my server. It will have a bunch of configurations set up so that it knows what to do when I pass in this broker environment state hrefresh. The users don't have to do anything. This is automatically run, and this is automatically run whether it be in a pre-link before a process runs or a post-link after a process runs. And you can specify that here in this case I have the no prompt checked, so therefore the user is not prompt for any data. You can have interactive UDPs as well where I actually uncheck that and I have a prompt where it's actually prompting the user for data so that it can actually run this user-defined process. So I can actually have a Harvest GUI-driven command line interface call through a user-defined process. And this is really how you start doing a lot of automation with Harvest, is using these types of user-defined processes.
So Warren, I'm just going to jump in. We've got a yes from
okay.
Larry, and Tony was asking what was the question again. I believe you were just asking in general, are they using UDPs?
Yeah, that was definitely an. Do we have user-defined processes that are being used across the across the organization, whether they be pre-linked or post-linked? That could be as simple as using them to do their mail notifications. But I just want to get a sense, are people using them, and because there's a lot of capabilities in the user-defined processes to start automating things. If they're just using it for mail, then maybe they want to start thinking about, well, what else could we actually automate here that makes sense in the organization so that we improve accuracy, improve efficiency, and basically take some of the onus off developers or builders or release managers to do work, and can we start automating that in Harvest? So for example, this refresh UDP, I can have a refresh UDP that runs post-link every time someone does a check-in. I could do a refresh. And that means that my build tool, whether it be OpenMake or whatever it might be, I'm using Ant could pick up that refresh directory and do a continuous build. So if I actually want to drive a continuous build solution out of Harvest, and I've heard people say, oh, Harvest is not an agile tool, it can't do agile development because I need to do continuous builds or continuous integrations. Well, that's untrue. I've set up Harvest many times to do completely agile environments, doing continuous builds, continuous delivery, continuous integration, but you need to start automating with things like your user-defined processes. So that's totally capable. So my question became bigger and bigger, but it sounds like people are using them, and I think that there's a lot of power and capability here.
Yes, definitely. Yep, we're getting yeses, but I think you're giving them some great insights as well. So thanks.
Good, and so scripting. Obviously, command line utilities. You're not going to sit there and write the command line utilities out every time you want to run them, and outside of user-defined processes, how do I actually start making this more capable? So I'm going to use the example of a continuous build situation. I want to set up continuous build. I know that Harvest is my source of record for all of my code. I've got everything I need to actually do continuous build, and the developers are interacting daily with my source code management tool, and they're checking in their code. How do I use what I have to actually create a continuous build environment? Well, you can use your UDPs that maybe upon every check-in, or maybe they need to promote as soon as they're done their unit testing, they're promoting up to the integration testing stage. And post-promote, we actually want to refresh and do a build. Once you start getting into that build side of things, depending on whether you're using an automation tool like OpenMake or whether you're using other build utilities, you may need to get into scripting. And scripting is great. If you're a Perl scripter or a VB scripter or a Shell scripter or a Power script, whatever scripting tool that you know, that's great. You don't have to switch. Use the scripting language that you know, or if you have a developer that you need to work with that really knows scripting, and you say, okay, we need to sit down together and we want to build a solution using Harvest and UDPs and command line interface and your scripting capability to build a continuous build solution that integrates with my build tool, whether it be Jenkins or Ant or whatever it might be. These tools can take data that's coming from Harvest, and they can get the project name, they can get the state name, they can get the package name or names, they can get, obviously they can get all the version, the file names that are coming out and the version numbers that are coming out, the release names if you're actually using package groups. And with all of that data that's coming, the scripting language can pick that up, and it can actually call your tool to actually do the builds. And if you're doing deploys, we can actually, again, call all your deployment tools with the appropriate information to pass that on. So SQL can be a big part of the scripting as well. The Harvest database is a very well-defined relational database model. You can report on anything that happens in Harvest using SQL, and guess what? There's a command line utility to do that as well called HSQL. HSQL allows you to query your database without needing to go in through any other SQL tool. If you have access to the Harvest application, you can query the database using HSQL. Very powerful in your scripting language because you can pull out data and you can actually use that data to help your automation. the last bullet, I know it's a big one, but it's true. You can do anything. You can do anything with with CLI and scripting. The sky's the limit. I've seen very, very small implementations to very, very large implementations of automation, continuous build, continuous integration, continuous delivery, using Harvest to drive it all through CLIs. Now, is that the perfect world? No, there's really great and powerful build automation tools out there, and why wouldn't you use them if you already have them? But Harvest can integrate with them, and it can pass all of the appropriate data to your build automation tools. But a poor man's build automation tool can be built very easily out of Harvest, so that you don't need to acquire and purchase that build automation tool. And that is exactly what the developers are doing with Git and Subversion. They're actually using scripting to do the stuff that needs to be done. There's a lot of functions that Harvest does that those tools don't do, and they're actually using scripting and command line utilities to do a lot of that work in Git and Subversion, to do their builds and to do their checklists and do their check-ins. You can do all of that stuff, and your developers can do all of that stuff around Harvest as well. Harvest just gives them a lot more capabilities than those open source tools around what data they have available and how they can start automating things. So that's my presentation. I was going to do a demonstration, but unfortunately this morning when I was trying to log in, my my demonstration on demand image of Harvest was not available this morning. It was available last night, but so I don't have a presentation portion or a demonstration portion of this, but hopefully I've covered an overview, which is really what this was meant for, an overview of command line interface tools, some of their capabilities, where you can find more information, and that's specifically in the command line interface administration guide that ships with your Harvest tool. And in the end, what this was really meant to do is to kind of, if you were unaware, to make you aware of some of the capabilities, to scratch the surface and to start investigating further as to what might be valuable. But I do want to throw it open for questions. If you have any thoughts about, if you've been thinking about, wow, I wish Harvest could do this, is there a way I can do this with a command line interface? Definitely throw that out there. Or if you're having any problems with command line interfaces, one of the things I didn't talk about is some of the limitations of command line interfaces. So there are some limitations that you need to be aware of that you can always deal with programmatically in your scripting language. Some of the limitations that you need to be aware of are the lists. So some of the CLIs that require lists, so like if you're trying to check out, or let's say you're trying to approve a whole bunch of packages, and you notice on the Harvest Approve package, the HAP utility, you put in the names of the packages. Well, you can put a whole list of those names of packages, but there's a limit on the number of those names of packages that command line utility can actually approve 2,000 packages using HAP. It would fail if you tried to put 2,000 packages into that list, but there's ways programmatically to deal with that. So, that's kind of important to know that there, and really in a lot of ways it's an operating system limitation as to how large that command line interface program call can be before the OS chokes on it. So any questions on this?
Hey, Warren, we do have a question in from Tony.
Okay.
There is a way to create Harvest projects. Whoops, sorry, it's just kind of rolling up. From the ground up with a CLI. Currently, we complete them manually.
When they say complete them manually?
I think maybe he meant create them.
Okay. So there is a way to do that. You can export your environments. There's a utility called HEXPENV that allows you to export your environment. That's the command line export, and this can allow you to build a definition file for a project, and then you can actually import that environment as well. So you can use the converse HIMPENV to import that project. And what you can do is you can actually modify that export file. It's kind of in a format that you want to be very careful with, but you can modify that export file and you can change names and state names and do all kinds of things. It gets more challenging when you want to add states and views because of the format of the file is not really that straightforward. But there are ways to deal with modifying the file that's created with expenv and then running the impenv, the import environment. So that is a couple of tools you can use. There's also the copy project command, the HCPJ, that allows you to copy the project. And that's the same as copying a project in the administration tool where you right-click on a project and say copy to in the admin tool. And you can do this programmatically through the command line. There are limitations again as to what you can do, and that's really the same limitations that you have in the copy project in the administration tool itself. The impenv and the expenv are a little more flexible about how you want to copy projects, and you can modify that export file slightly. And I recommend if you want to do that, go ahead and play with it. Run an expenv, modify that file, run the import, and see what you get, and you'll see what's possible within that utility. It's not a perfect solution, but it definitely works.
Yeah, and Tony confirmed that there are limitations with the HCPJ.
Yes, there are.
Yep, and thank you for that, and as well as Larry, who said good refresh before he starts his upgrade. So thank you for that, Warren.
No problem. Oh, he's doing an upgrade, 12.5 to 12.6? 12.1 to 12.6?
Let's see if he can answer that. Oh, 12.1.
12.1.
Okay. Yay, with a smiley face. Very proud of you, Larry.
Okay. Yeah.
No,
I mean,
it's going to be great.
It's going to be fine. It's a lot better than upgrades used to be. The upgrade process is much, much, much better and much easier for the end users to perform themselves, or the clients to perform themselves than it used to be. So that's great. Again, I recommend if you go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say again, definitely this is a really good guide for anyone that wants to get a better idea. It would take, I'm not going to go through all of this, but the command line reference guide is definitely something that if you're doing any command line development, this is what you need to have in front of you.
Excellent. Okay, and Tony as well is upgrading from 12.1 to 12.5, not sure when. That's great news to hear that you folks are coming to upgrade to some of our later releases. We are developing version 13 as we speak, and I'll be posting out invitations to join that validation program as well. So anyone interested in what's going to be happening with the latest and greatest version 13 of Harvest, please consider joining that. And let's
so you're not superstitious, Rose. You're not superstitious,
no.
Rose. You didn't move, just bypass 13.
No, I am superstitious. 13 is going to be the best one yet. So.
Okay, there you go. That's great. It will be. I agree.
Okay, I don't
see any other
questions. No, I don't see any coming in.
Nope.
Okay, everyone, thank you. And if you do have questions, do not hesitate to email any of us on the panel, or throw your questions up on the Harvest community. I think the Harvest community is becoming more and more well used in the last year or two, and I think that's great, because that's really a place that we can all learn and improve the knowledge, the general knowledge in the Harvest community. And I think that's only a good thing for everyone involved, not just you at your potential work site, but even if there's more people who are using Harvest and getting expertise in Harvest, and people are moving companies, I mean, there's expertise out there. It's a very good thing to build this community, and I think Rose has done a great job of promoting that, and so I think that let's keep on using that community.
Thanks, Warren. And Tony, to your point about keeping everybody informed, we are leveraging the community for that purpose. So please, if you're not registered, register yourself, and or continue to follow notifications the discussions, the blogs, et cetera. We're doing our best in not only myself from product management, but I'm trying to engage the entire engineering and Scrum team to be more interactive with the community. And you know, one more point before we close out the webinar for this morning is that we have started a thread in the community under discussions called Harvest Education Monthly WebEx Series, What Would You Like Us to Feature? We have 7 topics that various customers have submitted that they would like to see covered in this series, and this is just one of the other 7. If you have any other suggestions, would like any more detail on anything, please go ahead and add it to that thread, and we'll put it in our list, and we'll schedule a discussion around that topic for all of you. So thank you again for joining us. We hope you found it valuable. We certainly find your attendance valuable, and we'll look forward to having you join us again next month.
Thanks, Rose. Thanks, Warren. Have a great day, everybody.
Have a good day, everybody.